Thank you.
He doesn't. May 3rd.
Which is late. 5 minutes early is on time.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will now call to order the May 3rd, 2018 meeting of the Santa Barbara Local Agency Formation Commission. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Aceves?
Here.
Commissioner Geyer? Here. Commissioner Hartman? Here. Commissioner Scanian? Here. Commissioner Lavanino? Here. Commissioner Richardson? Here. Commissioner Stark? Here. Commissioner Waterfield?
Here.
Commissioner Welt?
Here.
And Commissioner Wolf? Here.
Thank you. At this time, please stand and join the commission in pledging allegiance to the flag. Jim?
Put your hand over your heart and repeat with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item of business is the approval of minutes of the April 5th, 2018 meeting. Can I please get a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you very much. We're good. Okay, thank you. Public comment. Now is the time for members of the public to speak on items that are not on today's agenda. Are there any requests to speak on items not on the agenda?
Chair Walt and members of the commission, we have no requests to speak on general public comment today.
Thank you. The next item of business is approval of the consent calendar. Are there any comments from the commission?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Thank you. The next item is business item 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Welt and members of the commission, business item number 1 is to consider recommendations regarding the recommended final budget for fiscal year 2018 through 2019.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Hood, LAFCO Executive Officer. I have a brief PowerPoint that pretty much follows the staff report that I sent out to you in the agenda packet. And this, I know you can't see it, but if we want to come back to the spreadsheet that shows each of the items in the budget compared to last year and the growth in the budgets over the last year and this current year recommended final budget. Let me just spend a few minutes and go over the legal responsibilities of LAFCO to establish a budget and carry out the mission outlined by the state legislature to fulfill the purposes described in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act, the CKH. We are required by Government Code Section 56.381 to conduct a public hearing to adopt a proposed budget for the next fiscal year, not later than May 1st. So we're ahead of schedule because the Commission adopted the proposed budget on April 5th, the last meeting you held in Santa Maria. And the proposed budget was transmitted to the county, each city, and each independent special district. So we are also required to adopt the final budget for the next fiscal year by June 15th. So again, we're pretty much ahead of schedule on that. The recommended final budget is $505,463, and it's an increase of $51,905 over the current year's budget, essentially an 11% increase. And last month I went over the primary reasons for the increase, which is to replenish contingencies reserves that were used in 2017-18 fiscal year because there were variances between direct billings and the costs coded to LAFCO by some line items, most specifically the clerk to the board and county council, increases of $53,000 and $28,000. And so at the end of the year, to balance the budget, working with the auditor's office, and they are in the audience today, and your executive officer, we agreed to transfer about $81,000, close to $80,000 from contingencies. So the adjusted budget for 17-18 was $433,558, and the recommended final budget is $505,463, and as I mentioned, an increase of about $53,905, which is mainly to replenish the reserves that we used last year. And just as a kind of an aside, you know, we're kind of limited when we have a contract staff, you know, with your executive officer and clerk to the board and legal counsel, that when we have a proposal that comes before the commission, we need to, you know, set it for hearing. We can't decide that we're not going to have a hearing because we are over budget for a particular item, which is mainly contractual staff services. In the past year, we had a very busy year, and so we had a number of very long hearings and complicated proposals that were billed to the LAFCO budget and were subsequently charged as to the contract staff, clerk to the board, and legal counsel. I don't get to charge anything additional. I get a set amount, so I don't bill anything extra for the time I spend. But when we have a contract staff, that kind of impedes us in some respect, that if we had a full-time staff that gets X amount of money, that they would work the amount of time it would take to process a proposal. We don't have that luxury. So I'm recommending that the commission review and accept all public testimony and approve the final budget for 2018-19, not 2016-17. That's in the past, so we'll move ahead with that. And direct staff to distribute the approved final budget to the city, counties, the county, and the special districts as required by Government Code Section 56.381, and notify the county auditor to proceed with the billings to the county, cities, and special districts. And those categories pay 1/3 of the budget each. Anything that is not offset by processing fees is divided equally between the 37 special districts in total based on the amount of revenues that they receive. The 8 cities based on the largest city paying the largest amount, and the special districts, again, with the bigger special districts paying a larger percentage of the 1/3 charge to all of the special districts. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And we do have a line item distribution in the budget staff report that I didn't copy on the PowerPoint, but it explains more about each of the line items and what they encompass. And we also have the spreadsheet that if you need to take a look at individual line items, that we have a larger copy of the one I showed you previously that Jacqueline was kind enough to develop. It's a little bit larger. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr.
Close
Hood.
my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Guyer.
Yeah, I can't read this chart, so I mean, whatever that is. What line item is accounts receivable on?
Here on Exhibit A, this is that.
Yeah. What account is what line item is accounts receivable, like fees that haven't been paid?
We don't have an account for that. We have an account for what we call planning study services, line item 5738, but we don't have an account receivable, and that's just the way that we're not an enterprise fund that has accounts receivable. We have a budget that is based on what is approved by the commission and the projection for revenues that might be received. But we do have, as I think you're referring to, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but there is one district that has not paid an amount that they were sent an invoice for the elections and assessor billings, and that's the Los Olivos CSD. But they appeared last month and said that they are going to pay the amount that I'll be talking about a little bit later as an information item to make up the deficit.
Well, my question is to have a balanced budget and you have revenue come in, it should show up somewhere. And that's why last month I asked if that's paid in time, then could that funding go into the contingency fund to offset some of the costs in that? The
interesting thing with the budget in last year's budget is that we received additional billings that from the assessor and the county elections that were that showed up in revenues. So we also received an amount from the agencies that paid the bills that show up in revenues, but the amount that we paid as a LAFCO commission was charged to the professional and special services account. I know that's a little confusing because it shows that we have received a large amount of revenues which are offset by expenses in the last year's budget, in the 17-18 budget.
Right, but that would balance itself off because you had excess costs also. So once the revenue comes in, that offsets it. In this case, we're going to wind up with revenue and the costs were in the previous year.
Well, it's in the current fiscal year, which is 17-18. That's where it shows up. So it looks, if you look at the as of date in the spreadsheet, which is the April 19th, 2018, we're showing revenues that are $53,000 in the planning services account. We only budgeted $25,000. But then if you look at the line item 7460 in professional and special services, we show expenses of $94,000, and we only budgeted expenses of $45,000. So I tried to point that out in my narrative, that it's not, and it's hard to explain if you don't know the situation. And the auditor asked me the same question, but it's basically it's a result of being billed additional money that we didn't budget for, but also being able to bill the proponents hopefully equally with the amount of money that we spent in the professional and specialized services account. To date, we have a deficit. We don't have the full amount that's been repaid, but I'm hoping by the end of the fiscal year that will be offset.
All right, one last pitch. That would be if you collected in this fiscal year, yes, I could see that work. The likelihood of that happening doesn't seem to be very great. So going into the next year, because we will have covered the deficit with our contingency fund, it would seem like that money then coming in should be dedicated to be put into the contingency fund to offset the loss. That's the last I'll say.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the commission? Okay, thank you very much. Is there any public comments on business item number 1?
Chair Walt and members of the commission, there are no requests to speak on this item.
Thank you. The chair will take a motion. The chair will take a motion.
I will so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Thank you. The next item is information item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Walt and members of the commission, informational item number 1 is to receive and file a report on the mailed ballot election for the LAFCO alternate special district member and the selection of the special district member to serve on the redevelopment agency oversight board.
Thank you. Mr. Hood.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we're going through a very interesting process. As you will recall from last month, I convened a meeting of the Independent Special District Selection Committee on March 25th, and by the time the meeting ended at 6 o'clock, convened the meeting at 5 o'clock, we did not have a quorum available. We had 16 of the 19 required for a majority of the special districts. And so the couple of items on the agenda were the independent special districts did not need to take action on appointment of Commissioner Ishkanian's appointment because she was the only nominee. So according to the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act, she was officially approved because there was nobody else that was nominated. So the meeting on March 26th was to appoint a replacement for alternate at that time, Commissioner Ishkanian. And because we did not have a quorum, we did not have any nominations from the floor. So that action could not be taken. And also we had 3 nominations for the Countywide Redevelopment Agency Oversight Board, but no action could be taken because we did, again, not have a quorum. So that's kind of the key issue. So I used my discretion to determine that a second meeting of the committee was not feasible and decided to send out mailed ballots and mailed nominations. So there are nominations for the Independent Special District representative on LAFCO and the election by a mailed ballot of an appointment to the Countywide RDA Oversight Board. And those nomination forms and ballots are due back by May 25th. And you might ask, why is LAFCO getting involved in appointments to redevelopment agency oversight boards? And just because the commission convenes a meeting of the Independent Special District Selection Committee, and so the legislature decided that we may as well take care of the appointment of the special district representative to the oversight board at the same time. We don't have anything to do with redevelopment agencies, never did, and maybe never will. But so that's why it was placed as a responsibility of your executive officer to call the meeting and have the agenda select both. So,
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Commissioner Geyer.
Paul, I wonder if you could further explain to the commission, because there was no other nominee, why? Because there was a vacancy, and that's why it was appointed. Could you explain that to the commission?
Yes, and the wording is very clear in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act that if there is a vacancy of a special district representative on LAFCO, then if there's only one nominee, then that person, which is Commissioner Ishkanian, is automatically, it doesn't say automatically, is appointed, is what it says. We had a vacancy because Commissioner Morehouse resigned effective February 1st, and so there was a vacancy on the commission for that seat. So that's why it's an appointment that was made, because there was no other nominees, and it's pretty clear in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hood. Any other comments? Commissioner Aceves.
Mr. Hood, so May 23rd, the ballots are due?
25th.
Or the 25th?
5 p.m.
And does that mean that at the June meeting, we'll be swearing in a new alternate member?
No, because what's going to be, there's two steps. You know, one is the nomination period, and if we get nominations for the alternate special district seat, then I need to send out a ballot.
Okay, I thought you sent out a ballot with the names, because you had 3 names.
That was for the redevelopment agency oversight board. But what I'm trying to do is send out the ballot, but not have it come back for at least 30 days, because special districts, many special districts only meet once a month. So in this case, the May 25th would give them 5 weeks to meet, and as special district members know, a lot of them only meet once a month, or maybe even less than that sometimes, but they need to have their board take action, because it's not, somebody just doesn't say, well, we nominate this person, or we select this person. It needs to be a board action by the presiding officer, and they need to be authorized to cast a ballot.
So realistically, we're looking at July or August.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we only use the alternate member if there's a conflict, or if the regular member, one of the regular members, is absent or can't make a meeting. And as long as we have a quorum, which we usually have a quorum, we can conduct business.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Other questions for Mr. Hood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question. You sent around a Nexus article about a potential conflict of interest for a district, a member on a district board to vote on his or her own membership as an alternate because there's compensation. Have you resolved that, and will you be sending out any information to the districts as they select their alternate?
I'll defer to legal counsel.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hartman, well, first and foremost, it's up to each district to confer with their own legal counsel to address that question. And I think maybe what happened in the Isla Vista CSD situation was their attorney wasn't present that day. Our office routinely advises the Board of Supervisors on appointments, and I know the city councils and special districts seek their own advice. But it's pretty well established there's a statutory exception when you define income, because when you get appointed to LAFCO, of course, you get some income from that. You get that big check. I forget how much it is, $150. So technically, if you vote for yourself to be appointed to LAFCO, you're voting for yourself to get that income. But by statute, in a Government Code Section 82030, it defines income. And income under subsection B, subsection 2 of B, that does not include salary or reimbursement for expenses or per diem associated with appointments. So by statute, your stipend you get for participating in LAFCO is not considered income. And since it's not income, it doesn't fall under all those tests for when you may or must recuse yourself from a vote.
Does the IRS know that?
The IRS knows everything, I think, except they don't see it the same way.
Yeah, they don't.
But anyway, I'm sure once, I think the confusion might have been, I'm not sure the legal counsel was at the Isla Vista meeting. They still don't have a source of money because the tax failed, and I think they're still trying to keep, I imagine they're trying to keep expenses down so they don't have, perhaps they don't have legal counsel at every meeting. But anyway, my office in advising the Board of Supervisors, who does the same appointment process all the time, does not see an issue here.
Thank you.
If I may, I'm just concerned that this may become, I don't know, I've attended other special district meetings that also don't have counsel present. I realize we can't give legal advice. Could we at least send out in the letter this section of the law that they may wish to consult?
I don't think that'd be appropriate for our office to volunteer. It'd just be really awkward. But the statements made here to LAFCO in response to your questions could certainly be passed along. Not that I encourage people to go find my words online and watch them, but, and then, well, it's really not a very difficult question. So I think they can also call the state. The state will give advice on this. The Fair Political Practices Commission gives advice to public agencies, especially on complying with conflict of interest provisions. And well, I don't think they called them timely. And the other thing is, Mr. Stark flagged, and he mentioned this to me at lunch, the special districts need to be aware, and this may apply to the county too, to have this exemption apply. It applies by statute, But apparently to fulfill the exemption, you have to also post on your agency website some sort of completion of a form that shows that this appointment was made, and therefore it's been disclosed and it's transparent. And so that was news to me, but there are additional regulations that people need to look at before they fully complete this process.
Commissioner Geyer.
Can you email us the government code that you quoted?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Bill? Okay. Is there any public comment on information item number 1?
Chair Welton, members of the commission, there are no requests to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item is information item number 2. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Welton, members of the commission, informational item number 2 is to receive and file a report on the 2018 Cal LAFCO staff workshop.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go over the program briefly because we did, Jacqueline and I attended the Cal LAFCO staff workshop a couple of weeks ago in San Rafael and found it to be a very informative session. I think I was at, I went on, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but I did attend a very interesting Point Reyes Farmstead Cheese Company outing on Wednesday morning where we got to eat a lot of cheese. And we had 900 head of Holstein cattle, cows actually, that we drove out and we had a very nice time, but there was definitely a lot of cheese, and we had lunch and we had cheese and we had cheese. So it was very interesting, but it was cheesy. And a baby calf was born in honor of the Cal LAFCO group, and we watched it. Then there was a session on Words from the Wise, Jedi Masters LAFCO, and I was included in that panel. It was the opening panel, and I thought it was very good, where I imparted wisdom to everyone. Nobody listened, but I tried to tell them how I perform and what I do. And we had some very good discussion. There was a very good case study on the North Richmond annexation, which is an area that's about a half square mile that's surrounded by the city of Richmond, where it has one of the highest crime rates in the state because it's not part of the city and it's served by the county sheriff. And there's some issues that they are trying to resolve by having the county and city agree on conditions of annexation that will provide services to this area, which is looking to expand economically because it's undeveloped pretty much. Residential area that has high crime rate. Also, we talked about the Independent Special District Selection Committee, and I've told you just about everything I know about that new process. We talked about strategic plans. There was a session on ag preservation, use of CEQA exemptions, and a very interesting session that Jacqueline attended on Through the Looking Glass, LAFCO's and Transparency, and I'm going to go over that later, which is, we are all trying to be, as public agencies, more transparent and have members of the public agencies, other agencies, look at our website and find information with ease. I'll talk about that later. Then there was a session that was very interesting on, does LAFCO have a role in disaster preparedness? And there was discussion by San Diego LAFCO about the fires that they had and consolidation of fire districts in San Diego, and also, fairly recently with the fire that was in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. There was discussion about the dam up in Butte County, and the dam breach that was fairly substantive because it was evacuation of couple of 100,000 people, I think, in that area. And then there was discussion about Sonoma County and the fires that they had up in Sonoma County, in Santa Rosa, the Orville Dam and the Santa Rosa situation where many homes were burned. And is there a role for LAFCO? I think if there is a role, it's very far-fetched to say that we should be involved in anything except assuring that there's public services available in an efficient manner from emergency operations personnel from fire departments, that they operate effectively. And then there's the legislative session, which is always on the last day, Friday. And then, so that was pretty much a summary. I thought it was a very good staff workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Commissioner Guyer.
If you have anything electronically that you could send me on that independent special district conversation, that'd be great to have.
Other questions for Mr. Hood? If not, is there any public comment on information item number 2?
Chair Welton, members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you. The next item is information item 3. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Welt and members of the commission, informational item number 3 is to receive and file a report on the Cal-LAFCO 2018 current tracked legislation.
Mr. Chairman, I don't really have a lot to say. I've given you the bills that Cal-LAFCO is tracking, and some are included in issues in the omnibus bill that are administrative items. There are different issues that we've been looking at. There's grant funding that might be available to implement the Little Hoover Commission recommendations. And so we're looking at that. It's not a great amount of money, $2 million over 5 years for implementation of inactive districts and getting dissolving inactive districts. There's a couple of validation acts. There's some other issues that are kind of interesting, but I don't really have any high priority items that I'm asking your commission to take a position on at this point, but I'll keep you posted as things move ahead. Special districts are now, pursuant to SB 929, required to have a website and post all of their budget information on the website, and this is, Cal-LAFCO has a watch position on that. And that's pretty much it. I'll be happy to respond to any bills if you have additional items that I should be looking at, but this is the watch list.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Any questions for Mr. Hood? If not, is there any public comment on information item number 3?
Chair Welt and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you. The next item is information item 4. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Welt and members of the commission, informational item number 4 is to receive and file a status report on the 2016 through 2017 fiscal year billings from the county assessor and county elections.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm not sure what to say on this. I put it on just to raise your awareness of the fact that Los Olivos CSD is still owing funds that we sent out an invoice, and I will most probably in the next day or so be sending out a second invoice. They still are required to pay $15,152.27 to us from the billings that we paid back in September. So it's just an information item that I will be following up and letting you know the status of that.
Well, thank you for keeping that in front of us. Is there any public comment on information item number 4?
Chair Welt and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on that item.
Thank you. The next item is information item 5. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Welt and members of the commission, informational item number 5 is to receive and file a report on LAFCO and transparency.
Mr. Hood.
We'll put a checklist up on the screen. I don't know if we can read it. Can we get that any bigger? We'll try. But one of the sessions at the conference, at the workshop, was a checklist to advise the LAFCO staff and commissioners of what the requirements are for transparency. And every time I talk to the grand jury, I tell them that we have to comply with different acts, the Ralph M. Brown Act, Public Records Act, conflict of interest forms. We need to adopt a budget, adopt policies and procedures that are posted on the website, catalog enterprise systems pursuant to SB 272 with a link to the homepage, and we're reviewing the requirements of SB 272 now. It's mainly a Public Records Act piece of legislation that was approved back in 2015. Again, it requires that LAFCO posts items on the website with regards to contracts and things of that nature that that LAFCOs get involved with, and all required notices and public hearing notices posted should be posted on the website. I'm not sure how we do this. Oh, it's just like a computer. The website, there's several items that should be included on the LAFCO website. And by the way, we'll give you our ranking in a little bit. Jacqueline was at the meeting, so she filled out the checklist. But we should adopt a fee schedule in all forms that should be on the website. Information of how to serve on the commission and deadlines, names of contact information for the executive officer and key staff, board commission meeting schedule, which we do a lot of these, the mission statement, which we approved back in 2013 fiscal year, the services, special services and functions and service areas. We are in the process of trying to make the municipal service reviews and spheres of influence readily accessible from our homepage. And as part of that, we'll be updating new information that was submitted as part of our municipal service reviews. Several agencies, a couple that come to mind were the Vandenberg Village and the Isla Vista Rec and Parks District that provided comments. We need to update those and get them on our website. Authorizing statutes. A lot of people want to get a copy of the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act, believe it or not. Budgets, current year, jurisdictional boundary maps, sphere maps, archives of meetings. We have those in videos that are available. For the last 6 months, we have been going back beyond that. And information about how to receive notices and agenda mailings, and information about how to ask for public records. And on the website, we all have websites, but we need to have the most recent financial audits on the website, municipal service reviews, as I mentioned, list of all agencies, and links to their website, which would be very helpful. Compensation information, pay schedules if the commission has a staff that belongs to CalPERS, contracts, homepage links for agencies and board packets. Other transparency measures taken by the organization, which is us. And the results of that, I'll let Jacqueline mention that because she filled out the checklist. We ranked.
Chair Welton, members of the commission, as Paul mentioned, I attended the conference on this particular issue, and we ranked at 24, which was good with room for improvement. I would say in the room of about 40 people, we were one of the highest. So it was pretty impressive, and hats off to Paul and all of his work that he has put into upgrading our website to get it to where it is today. I'm definitely impressed with that, and now we know a few pointers of things we've already even incorporated, which is including the agenda link right on our homepage, so easy access there, which is nice.
Great.
So
well
we're
done.
actually at 26.
Well, thank you. Well done.
We don't want to go over 33, though. We're striving to keep below the pretty darn transparent.
Yeah, good. Any questions for staff?
I do have a question.
Shane?
It's a very simple linear question. We're 26. How many of the things that we don't do, that we could do, can we do without spending money? Is that clear enough? I mean, you can do something without spending money, or you can have to pay for it.
I think there's things that we can do that I'm trying to work on to make getting on the homepage and clicking on the homepage much more user-friendly, if you will, particularly with regards to municipal service reviews and spheres of influence. I'd like to be able to just push on a district, for instance, and have the municipal service review come up, and with a map that now is in the county surveyor's website. I'd like to have all of that, easily accessible. And I don't think that would cost a lot of money. I think it's something that I plan on doing with Jacqueline's help and our webmaster's help. He has not charged us since we did the original website update back in 2013-14, and he's very agreeable. And the county surveyor, we pay them for maps, and so they're very agreeable and very helpful when we ask them to do anything. So we'll try and spend the minimum amount.
Thank you.
But have a good product.
Commissioner Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think these things do cost money, but I know the county is thinking about Spanish language for a website, and then EDA has some requirements for websites. And so I'm just curious how that fits into your thinking about this.
Chair Welton, members of the Commission, I know for our website in particular, it translates it into Spanish. Our webmaster enabled that, which is kind of a neat feature. And they did talk about the ADA feature in the session about how they are trying to come up with some ways of the website talking back to you if you are sight impaired and hearing impaired, making sure that everything is just, transparent in terms of language and no sounds or anything that you might be missing. So, yeah, it was neat. They had some helpful tips and said that they were going to share if any of the counties had incorporated the hearing or the sight impaired in their websites, but no one had at that point. So.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you. Is there any public comment on information item 6? Sorry, item 5.
Chair Welton, members of the Commission, there are no requests to speak on that item.
Thank you. The next item is information item 6. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Welton, members of the Commission, informational item number 6 is to receive and file a Cal LAFCO white paper entitled State of the Art of Agricultural Preservation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, this was a very timely white paper since we had a discussion last month about the Environmental Defense Center letter, and I was directed by your commission to report back in July about new policies that we could implement in our commissioner handbook that would emphasize the important role that LAFCO plays in ag preservation. So I'm sending this to you because I will probably be taking some of the information from the white paper that was the American Farmland Trust and Cal LAFCO volunteers to include in our policies, and discusses economic, environmental, and cultural importance of ag land to local communities in the state, and some other issues that talk about CEQA and how we can expand our role in annexations and avoid impacts on loss of farmland. I know your commission has been very interested in that. So I'm giving this to you basically for your information and to discusses ag land preservation around the state, and the American Farmland Trust is at the front of that, as well as the group that we heard from last month, Environmental Defense Center, which has a local flavor to it. A lot of folks from around the county that are interested in ag preservation, and one of LAFCO's primary roles is to protect ag land, discourage urban sprawl, and preserve open space. So I will be coming back with some revisions to our commission policies regarding this. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Comments? Yes.
Yeah, I love this white paper. Too bad we didn't have it last month. I thought maybe they were cribbing off of our white paper since it was done in February. But some of the things that I had been thinking about in this year of tutorial year was sphere of influence and how important that is. Once you allow that, the annexations are just inevitably coming at you, you know, and so I hope one of the things that will be sharpened up is the sphere of influence, parameters for sphere of influence, and I think this white paper addressed that. So that was one thing, and I was say that the last part, it says applying all of these approaches, all these wonderful ideas which centers on what we all want, and also it defined prime agriculture, which is one thing I thought would be elementary. But the next thing is applying these approaches, and for LAFCO, you sit here with a crowd of people, and they come from all angles, and there are bureaucracies dedicated to the opposite of maintaining prime agriculture, and I'm wondering how we incorporate, for instance, complying with the HCD numbers, which come at you. If you're a city, they come at you and hit you like a nuclear bomb, and you're supposed to do something with them. And one way, if you have a large sphere of influence, you can annex land, which we have seen happen, and dump it there. So, I mean, there's whole bureaucracies that feel they're just as much an authority as anybody else, and we're ending up having to implement it. So, anyway, I was fascinated. I thought this was just a wonderful treatment, but the applying these approaches shows some of the complexities. So it's not that we're being vague or double talking, it's that we have to factor in all of the oppositional forces that come on to attack preserving prime agriculture. So that's my comment. I was very happy to see this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious about the process that we have. With the EDC letter, I didn't realize how rich the possibilities were, but this paper really outlines a whole series of different policies that I believe the agricultural and environmental community would be really interested in, and I just think bringing it forward to this board in July, maybe we could talk more about process, how to engage them, or a workshop, or maybe it would be post, but I think there will be a lot of interest in this, and it would be nice to get input before it comes back to us for a decision.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, that's one of the things I want to do. That's the next step, is to reach out to the group that presented the paper to us last month, the Environmental Defense Center, and share this document with them, and reach a consensus that we are definitely doing a lot of the things that they've outlined in their letter, and kind of reach a ground where we can adopt LAFCO policies that would try and implement both the letter and the white paper. So I'll be doing that in the next week or couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Shane.
Yes. Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I guess this is a suggestion more than anything. When our ED returns in July with a report, could we get a report on the extent to which any policies that we initiate can satisfy environmental review by tearing off the ordinance that the county did? I assume there was some sort of environmental review, so we know how much work and money are actually involved in this effort, and how much has gone before.
That's a very good point. It's talked about in the white paper. Tiering is one of the approaches that LAFCO, as a responsible agency, many times gets involved with. We're very rarely in a situation where we are a lead agency that requires an environmental impact report. Generally, we're a responsible agency, and we can tier off other environmental documents, EIRs or mitigated negative declarations, if they include our comments. So it's really critical that we be advised of any documents that are coming through that we could use if we get an application without being a lead agency, and so that's very helpful.
Thank you. Commissioner
I'd just like
Skanian.
to say, yeah, thank you. This is, I go carried away here, but I thought one of the great things about applying this, and something I've noticed here, is that people, citizens, homeowners to whom their whole lives involved in their homes, they come to LAFCO as a place of last resort. And I realize from having worked with land use and planning That's where they should be. That's where a lot of their problems should be solved before ever, it's not in our purview to deal with some of the things that they're coming here, and we have great sympathy for their situation, perhaps, but it can't be dealt with. That's not part of our mission statement. So working with P&Ds of the various cities and county is a way to solve the people's problems before they get to where they are out of options. Yeah.
Thank you. Paul?
LAFCO does not have land use authority, so the most we can do is require pre-zoning by a city, and whatever the city pre-zones, then it should be a guide to LAFCO about approving an annexation. But it's not saying that if a property was annexed, they couldn't change pre-zoning, so I'm pretty wary of that. But the county has land use authority, and the cities do. Special districts don't. So we request information from county P&D and from the city planning offices and planning commissions when we write a staff report and make a recommendation. And it could result in a no recommendation, or if it doesn't meet the land use categories. Particularly if it's ag land and a property owner wants to come in and annex ag land, goes through the environmental review process. We have one city that is doing that right now. And then as part of the annexation, the city council would change the zoning after it's annexed. Well, that's kind of backwards. Needs to be changed in the county before it goes into the city. And so, we kind of a red flag. So we look at city general plans, we look at the county's general plan, and that helps us in our advice, and we request information from both cities and the county.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Other questions, comments, observations? If not, is there any public comment on information regarding item number 6?
Chair Walton, members of the commission, there are no requests to speak.
Thank you. We will now go to commissioner announcements and any requests for future agenda items. Commissioner Guyer.
Yeah, I have a request for a future agenda item after the budget is adopted. I'd like to have a review and discussion of the LAFCO fees, my annual pitch, mainly the components and applications of the EO's time, council time, and staff time as it applies to each type of application.
Mr. Hood.
Very good. Commissioner Guyer and I discussed this, and I agree that it's a good thing that I'll bring this back at a future meeting and try and be able to recover costs more equitably, based on the amount of time that we spend.
Thank you.
And we're limited in some respects because we can't bill until we receive an application. And so we put in a huge amount of time in pre-application process advising applicants. Los Olivos was a good example, San Ynez CSD, of what they need to do to get an annexation or formation of a district. But those are probably hundreds of hours that we spent that we can't recover from the applicants. So we need to get a way to charge that back.
Thank you. Commissioner Waterfield, I haven't forgotten about you up in the North County. Any comments, questions, hellos?
I'm doing good. I'm listening, and I'm fine over here, just all by myself.
All right. Thank you. Other commissioner comments? Okay. We will now go into the executive officer's comments.
I'm going to bring this up again. We had a public comment period last month about Mr. and Mrs. Foss and their annexation to the San Ynez CSD, and you recall that. It's a very interesting discussion. And just to kind of recap, I sent out an email to the commissioners of my correspondence to Mr. Foss and tried to enlighten him about the process. And I'm trying to be diplomatic and help as your executive officer in contact with the public. I offered to put an out-of-agency service agreement on today's agenda to allow him to connect to the San Ynez CSD sewer system, wastewater system, And that would generally comply with planning and development's requirements that to get a building permit, that he has an agreement to get wastewater services. And he declined. Basically, I asked the Santa Ynez CSD to place an item on their agenda a couple of weeks ago, and they did, filing an application for an out-of-agency service agreement. But Mr. Foss said that he wasn't going to pay the fee for that. And I'm being as diplomatic as I can. So what we're trying to do is get the application, if we can, on the agenda for June, the annexation application, which he has paid the fees, but we're still having a problem getting the map and legal description approved by the county surveyor's office. And the applicant's private civil engineer surveyor has been very, well, he was out of the country for 3 weeks, I find out after calling him a number of times. And he has not given us the final map and legal yet. So again, in my email, we need to send out requests for report backs, and that takes 30 days. And we don't have the final application complete yet. So I'm not sure if we're going to make it in June. I'll do what I can. I can maybe get the timeline down from 30 days to 21 days because it's not a controversial annexation, but even if the commission approved it, conditioned upon the map and legal description, being finalized, it still wouldn't complete the annexation until that takes place. So it's kind of a catch-22. So I'll do what I can to help.
Thank you for that update. Other comments?
Just one more comment. We did get a Public Records Act request from the Santa Rita Hills folks a few weeks ago, which I complied with within the time period. County also got a request for information, and I believe, Jacqueline would know, but I believe that the county followed up and supplied the information that the individual requested. So just an ongoing story, more staff time that's not billable.
Well, thank you for that. Other comments? If not, thank you very much. I will now adjourn this meeting to Thursday, June 7th in Santa Maria at 1 o'clock. Thank you, everybody.